Congressman Brad Sherman, our next guest, he chairs the Subcommittee on Terrorism in the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Mr. Sherman, thanks so much for being here as well.
Good to be with you.
The President made reference to the Christmas bombing attempt on the jetliner and talked about intelligence. Is there consensus on the intelligence response to the Christmas event at this point?
Well, I don't think you have a national consensus on all the details. You just heard my colleague Dan Lundgren criticize how the administration handled it.
Yes, but you've heard in Congress from Dennis Blair and others in the apparatus, in the security structure. I'm looking at it from the professional's point of view.
Well, certainly the executive branch comes to the Congress with a united front. With whatever internal arguments they are, those in your profession are more likely to extract that from leaks than we are. When we get briefed, they come with one voice.
Well, what are your takeaways about how Al-Qaeda might be functioning from what we know about the planning in that particular case?
Well, it's clear that they have downgraded their objectives. For many years, they didn't try to do something this small. They were trying to do something enormous in hitting the United States, and then they tried to hit our allies with medium-sized attacks. They've now gone from what was a plan to kill tens of thousands of Americans, ended up killing about 3,000, to one that was designed to bring down a single airplane. Their infrastructure is dismantled. At the same time, the very fact that bin Laden is alive, that they're still there, gives them a propaganda appeal on the web and in the world that's dangerous. And this is going to be a long war.
And what is the appropriate response at this point in time with its restructuring?
Well, I think the President's approach of focusing on Afghanistan makes sense but the real focus is Pakistan. And 9/11 was because we were unwilling to imagine the unimaginable. Now we're willing to imagine what happened on 9/11. The focus has really got to be on nuclear weapons and perhaps bioterrorism. We have to be willing to imagine that one of these terrorist groups or rogue countries will try to take out an American city. And that's why it's so important to prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons.
As you know, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton is in London, where there's a foreign ministers conference on this very subject of security issues. They yesterday spent part of the time talking about Yemen, where the response from the local government is being applauded. What do you see there coming out of the government's response that pleases you or concerns you?
I think we're taking basically the right approach toward Yemen. We have to realize that there is no central front in the war on terrorism. If there is, it's Iran and Pakistan. Pakistan already has nuclear weapons and is to some degree unstable, and Iran is trying to develop nuclear weapons and would at least threaten us with them, if not actually using them. So we need to focus on the nuclear threat, and Iraq and Afghanistan to some degree are just important because we happen to be there. Yes, Al-Qaeda can use Afghanistan as a place to train, but they're using Yemen, they're using Somalia. There are many places where Al-Qaeda is operating.
In the first segment on the subject, I showed David Ignatius' column, who writes this morning, there's a growing recognition, especially within the U.S. military, that America has to get out of the business of fighting expeditionary wars every time a new flashpoint erupts with Al-Qaeda.
We can't put 100,000 troops everywhere Al-Qaeda might operate. What we have to do is recognize this is going to be a long war with many aspects to it, that we are going to incur some casualties year after year after year, and that's not consistent with American culture. We're shaped by the World War II experience. We want to mobilize the whole country and win in 3 years and be done with it. And it's going to be a real test of this country whether we can stay the course a long term without necessarily investing too much of our resources in any one effort, in some dream that if we can just win one battle or we just do something for 1 year, that the war on terror will be over.
Napa, California, Democrats line.
Hi. You know, we've been at this war now for over almost 10 years, and I'm just kind of wondering, is there another way besides fighting them? I mean, if you guys tried, what is it they want, and why do they hate us so bad? I mean, what did we do to the Al-Qaeda to force them into this position?
What they want is a worldwide caliphate in which the values of the Taliban would be imposed on virtually the entire world. If you look at their pronouncements, I was just talking to the ambassador of India, and she points out that the demand of the radical jihadists is that all of India be brought under Muslim control and that all Hindus in India be forcibly converted. You see their demands for Al-Andalus. Well, what is that? That's a Islamic Spain. So the idea that we could just surrender one or two countries and they would be happy, you just whet their appetite. And keep in mind, when you have an expansionist and an evil philosophy and you give them everything they want, they'll want more. There's a tendency of Americans to think that everybody is sane and rational, and if you could just, put a chicken in every pot, everybody would be happy. And that is, in fact, not the case. So many of the terrorists who have actually attacked America come from middle-class and even upper-class families. It's not a matter of, economic development and diplomacy can play a role, but there's a hard core that cannot be satisfied with anything short of ending all education of women worldwide.
Tampa is next. Patrick, Republican line for Mr. Sherman.
Yes, good morning, sir. Good morning, Brad. How are you?
Good to be with you.
I know Iran from 1980 when Carter was foreign politicians and what's going on. That country is bent on destruction of the U.S. and they're going to lie, cheat, do whatever they can to try and trick us. And they're so far out of touch with reality, that president of that country, it isn't funny. But I have an expired ID, and I tried to get a library card, and they asked me for a passport and a birth certificate in a town I grew up in 45 years. Now, these people are so scared in New York City that I spoke to corporations yesterday. They are moving out because they want to try those terrorists in Manhattan.
Okay, thanks, Patrick. You've given us a couple of different issues to work with there. Mr. Sherman?
Well, we've tried dangerous terrorists in courts in the United States before without incident. And frankly, in terms of somebody breaking out of prison, there are tough gangs members in prison now. If any one of them broke out, they would have connections, they would know how to operate, and they would be violent. And I think just as scary to individual households near the prison as an escaped terrorist who might not even know the English language, have a difficult time blending in. As to Iran, I do not think that Iran, if they develop a nuclear weapon, would turn around and just use it on a sunny day in an effort to bring back the 12th Imam with some sort of apocalyptic vision. Instead, I think that Iran would practice terrorism with impunity. They're already the #1 state sponsor of terror. They've blown up things as far away as Argentina. And every one of these terrorist acts, or every confrontation in the Strait of Hormuz with the U.S. Navy, would put us eyeball to eyeball with a very arrogant, very hostile nuclear regime. And we made it through the Cuban Missile Crisis, but considerably saner than Ahmadinejad. And we only made it through one Cuban Missile Crisis. I'm not looking to do several or to do one or two every year. So I think it's important that we tremendously increase the sanctions on Iran. I've been calling for that for 12, 13 years now. And so far what we've done is pitifully small under 3 administrations compared to what we could do.
We're talking to Congressman Brad Sherman, who is the chairman of the Subcommittee on Terrorism of House Foreign Affairs, reacting to the president's messages in last night's State of the Union address. Chicago is next. This is Henry, Democrats line. Hello, Henry.
Independence line. Hello?
Yes, we're hearing you. Go ahead.
Hello, Henry.
Independent, not Democrat. And,
okay.
Brad, you're doing a good job on explaining the question that's been asked to you this morning. But here's my problem as an independent with Democrats. The difference between a terrorist and an enemy combatant. This is why everybody is talking about where we try them at. Al-Qaeda is an organization that's using terrorism to inflict their views on the world, as you explained to the other guy. These are not soldiers that they employ. These are enemy combatants who are Al-Qaeda is using religious and economic woes and beliefs in order to recruit them. These people are still people, and as Americans, when we catch these enemy combatants who have been confused and used by their own religion, most of them are economically stable. Like you said, they're middle class, upper class. They've been used and brainwashed through their own religions to take on this jihad. So when we capture them as Americans, instead of putting them in a military jail somewhere and cutting them off from their family and other people like that, I agree that we should show them that we are Americans. Understand. Now, we're not going to take no slack from y'all. We're going to try you, and you are guilty of your crime that you did. But as Americans, we have to be able to turn the other cheek and understand that, hey, you have heard this and been brainwashed and yada, 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 and you made this mistake. But we're not going to make the same mistake because we're Americans. We're above that.
Henry, thank you.
Well, I do think that we should be trying to liberate imprisoned terrorists from the ideology that has imprisoned them. Saudi Arabia has tried to do a job with the I guess least dangerous terrorists that we have sent back to them. They thought they had a very good program to put these folks back with their families and re-educate them. In fact, many of the terrorists that we have returned to Saudi Arabia from Guantanamo are now practicing terrorism again, fighting us in either Afghanistan or in Yemen. So we do need to try to win people over, whether that be a hardened terrorist or whether it be all nearly 7 billion people in the world. But we can't assume that just because we're right, we're going to be able to convince folks.
Coudersport, Pennsylvania. Joe, Democrats line. Good morning, Joe.
Good morning. Hello?
Yes,
Hello,
you have
Joe.
a question?
Yeah. I've been watching the comments this morning on the TV about people commenting on the president's speech last night, and I was watching on Fox, and they had Rudy on, the noun and verb, and 9/11, and basically that's the only thing that the Republicans have to campaign on. 8 years of the Republican administrations, and they did nothing except get us into 2 wars, one of which we shouldn't be in. And they campaign constantly on defense and security. And I think, they should read their history books. There were 2 Democratic administrations that won the 2 great world wars, and actually a Democratic administration that brought us through the Korean War, and a Republican president that ended that war without a win. So I think the Democrats do have a good history on defense. Another thing I wanted to get at is when 9/11, the Republicans are almost saying that 9/11 came during a Democratic administration, which it did not. Rudy Giuliani he alludes to this all the time. When 9/11 happened, George Bush sat petrified in a schoolroom in Georgia, shaken. Dick Cheney immediately went into a bunker. Now these guys I believe they don't want these terrorists tried in New York, especially Cheney, because he's afraid that one of these boogeymen might get loose from the courtroom and come hunting for him.
All right, Joe, we're going to stop it there.
I don't think that Dick Cheney or any American has got to fear one of these terrorists getting loose in the courtroom. I think we can make sure that they remain locked up and unarmed. On the one hand, I'm a Democrat, and when passions get up, I'm on the side of the caller. But at the same time, I'd rather see passions lower, and rather than say all Democratic presidents have been good or all Republican presidents have been bad. I hope we can all work together.
In reaction to your comments about Iran, Mati Laban sends this Twitter message. Do you think sanctions on Iran would be effective? China and others would love to have Iran business. Sanctions didn't work for Iraq.
Well, actually, Susan, and sanctions did work. We just didn't realize it. The sanctions on Iraq hollowed out Saddam's military. The sanctions on Iraq prevented him from even maintaining his stock of chemical weapons. He was so afraid of the overall international effort. Sanctions worked with regard to South Africa. They don't always work. As to China, I think that for to be truly effective, our sanctions do need to be worldwide, and we have got to let China know that their continued access to U.S. markets depends upon their cooperation with us on the Iran issue. But even without Chinese support, all of the technology in Iran is European, the vast majority of it. And if they can't get spare parts, well, when an elevator breaks and you can't get the spare part, that elevator's out. So many different little aspects of the Iranian economy could be severely hit by an absolute sanctions regime just from the West. But frankly, we have got to get China on our side. We are a sovereign country. We control our own ports, and the next ship of tennis shoes may or may not be allowed to come in.
Annapolis is the last question for Mr. Sherman. This is Joe, Republican line. You're on.
Good morning.
Morning.
Congressman, you stated that, the reason that these people are attacking the United States and its interests around the world are because they want a world caliphate, or they want, a world dominated by Islam. I just wanted to say I find that a little hard to believe, and I think that most of the American public would agree with me that the United States government, kind of reminds me of the Gambino crime family. These people are angry with us because agents of our government and representatives of our government, selfish interests, are looting these people and oppressing these people. And the fact of the matter is that we were just in our cause. The rest of the world would zealously fight alongside with us. Their resources and their blood and their treasure wouldn't be an issue.
Thank you, Joe.
The matter is,
Joe, let's get a response. We're almost out of time.
Well, I don't think America is the Gambino crime family. I don't. As Americans, we like to believe that everyone in the world is reasonable, and there are the vast majority of Muslims in the world are reasonable. But you do have a hardcore. The fact is that Hitler was intensely and genuinely popular at various times in Germany, and that's not because he was right. It's not because Britain or the United States were the Gambino crime family of the 1930s or the 1940s. And the fact that there is a hard core of people in Al-Qaeda and other groups who would love nothing more than to see more and more American women and children die, that doesn't mean that there is any justice in American civilians dying.
Mr. Sherman, thank you very much. We appreciate you coming back from time to time throughout the year to take our viewers' questions. Thanks for being here this morning.
Good to be with you.